Bicolline over here next to Lady Elsa. And hey, V-Dread Duck here, and we're at Bicolline. Woohoo! How can you believe it after all this time? All right, so believe it or not, we're actually back at Bicolline. And we've been fighting all morning. As you can probably tell by my old, sweaty tiredness. There's still a battle going on. I'm just playing dead in the middle of it so that we can actually get some footage of the fight taking place. We're in kind of a perfect spot here, even though they probably would think otherwise. So while you're watching a little bit of footage of the fighting, let's talk about what this campaign was actually about. So after a very long break, in part due to the Great Plague of 1019 and 1020, the soldiers from the Empire and the Argonne Federation took a break, and they basically went to a very remote tropical resort on the island of Sumet to enjoy a vacation. Obviously, with soldiers from both the Empire and the Federation in the same place, fights immediately broke out over the best place to play troll ball or who gets to sit at the pool bar. As you can see, it's very much a sort of tongue-in-cheek, light-hearted event intended to kind of break things back in after a very long break. I mean, we've gone almost 2 years now without a real campaign or battle. So this wasn't a battle over territory or resources. This was a battle over who gets to enjoy the lovely beach of this tropical island. In the end, the troops from the Argonne Federation were victorious, and the Empire had to go stay at the lesser beaches while the Aragonese troops enjoyed the lovely tropical paradise that is this remote island. Alright, so here's some first-person footage. As you can see, I'm wielding a two-handed halberd, which has a spear pointy end and an axe, but it's only about a 6-foot weapon that I'm holding. Now let's pause here. I want you to see how things develop and why weapon lengths matter. So you can see there's a gap that forms between the two lines, and that gap is roughly a spear length, or roughly 9 feet. And what happens is you have a choice of weapons that ranges from your standard one-handed weapon, which is up to 44 inches, two-handed weapons up to 5 feet, a hafted weapon like an axe, which can be as much as 7 feet, and then a purely stabbing weapon like a spear, which can be up to 9 feet. So we'll let the battle continue here, but as you can see, what happens is you get these large gaps that form, which is basically the length of a spear. So you'll have some shieldmen that are blocking, spears behind them, hafted weapons that are moving along trying to find gaps, find someone who's looking the other direction, which is what happens to me right here. I go in to get this guy, and basically I don't see the guy on my left when I do. So I kill that guy, but at the same time I get killed by a guy to my left who is of course out of camera because I wasn't looking that direction. So this is how these different weapons interact with one another, so that a spearman by himself could easily be overwhelmed by someone with a simple, 44-inch one-handed weapon and a shield, because all they have to do is push past the spear tip, get up on him. If they can outrun him, at least as fast as he can run backwards, they'll be able to take him out. But if he has, say, an archer with him, well, you're going to have a hard time closing that gap unless you've got armored legs, because the archer is going to take out your leg and prevent you from doing it. Now, all of this doesn't take into account something like individual player skill, but if you just look at the weapons themselves, a large part of what goes on is the interaction of the different weapons, almost like a rock, paper, scissors game. So a heavily armored individual with a halberd, like a 5-foot long, 6-foot long axe, can easily defend against an archer, even though they can easily hit that archer, because all they have to do is keep presenting a different target. If you combine a halberdier with an archer, for example, they can go up against someone with a shield, because the halberdier goes in and distracts the shieldman, pulls the shield out of position so that the archer can then engage them. Same thing with a spearman and a shieldman. Obviously, that's sort of your ideal combination, because you've got someone who can block with an invulnerable shield, but they only have a 44-inch reach, or maybe if they've got really long arms, maybe a little bit more than that. But you combine that with a pikeman who's got a 9-foot reach. That shieldman isn't offensive, he's entirely defensive. He can use that shield to block, while that pikeman works his way around and tries to get angles. Everything ultimately comes down to working out angles. It works on an individual level, so if it's 2 versus 2, or 2 versus 1, or 3 versus 1, whatever, when you're trying to work the angles on somebody, you get to a position where they can't defend or they're not looking. That's where you have success. The exact same thing happens when you start getting into larger groups, like, say, 20 versus 20. If you have guys who can get out there and work those edges, get on the edge of those flanks, of course, it depends. Your center has to hold. You have to have a solid group in the center that holds up. But you get somebody out on those flanks, and they can then start to chip away at those flanks. Or if you've got somebody fast enough, they can work rapidly into the center and cause that center to collapse. It happens, it scales infinitely, so when you've got 500 people, you still have the same effect. So, a couple of final thoughts on this campaign and just being back at Bicolline in general. First, it was absolutely fantastic being able to get back out there and see old friends and participate in, the events again after so long. And second, footwear is so very important. I cannot stress enough how much of an issue footwear is. I have continued to struggle to find period appropriate footwear that's suitable for someone of my size wearing heavy armor. So I again tried to wear a different style of period footwear, and in the end my feet were just absolutely shredded. Next time I go back, I'm just gonna wear combat boots, and I'm gonna disguise them as best I can. Although you don't have to. If you look at a lot of this footage, you'll see that a lot of smart people are wearing modern footwear, because the bottom line is your comfort, your health is more important than style when it comes to being out there. You need some sort of athletic footwear that you can jump around and run on uneven terrain wearing significantly heavier gear than you normally do in everyday life without damaging your feet. And it's a big deal. So with that said, I'll come back to how the game actually plays out, and when you're on the battlefield, if it's not a duel and you're not 1v1, the most important thing that you're constantly looking for is to work those angles, just like real combat, in the sense that you're always trying to get an advantageous angle on your opponent. If you square off with somebody, the chances are the person who takes you out is going to be the person on your left or right that you didn't see because you were focused on one opponent directly in front of you. So I'll just I'll cut this here, and I will leave you with some words of wisdom from one of the elves of Colibri, which Mithrin, I think, put it very well.
Some guy opened his he was like, oh, and then I just stood there, and then I waited for a polearm to start walking up, and I was like,
yeah, he's not paying attention to you.
And then he goes to run, and I'm like, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. I was like, because teamwork makes the dream work. I'm not gonna shoot you alone. I would never.